All right, let's talk about Babylon 5 versus Deep Space Nine. You said anything I want.
You ever read The Monkey's Paw? What happened with that story? What about it? What about it?
Your take.
No, they took.
Yes, good one. So let's talk about it.
I look at you askance. The record is the record. I wrote Babylon 5. We pitched it for 5 years. We brought it to Paramount during that period of time. They got very excited about it. It's a companion piece of Star Trek. They started talking deals. Suddenly, everything went away. Then we did our presentation when they picked it up at P10 for B5, and suddenly they announced. What I heard about it first was I was working at home, hadn't heard a word about what the sequel was going to be, and I got a call from Richard Arnold. Walter Koenig, who said, I had lunch today with Richard Arnold, the fan liaison at Star Trek, and he talked about the new Star Trek show. And I said, why is this a problem? And B5 is not about a starship, it's about a space station identified with a letter and a number. It's a port of call in neutral territory, captain with a destiny, female second in command, and a shapeshifter. That's Star Trek. Well, their show is a space station, neutral territory, with a number and a name, a commander with a destiny, a shape changer, a female second in command, in neutral space, and a port of call. Really? And it almost killed us twice. Mm-hmm. We almost lost the show because of this, before we even got started. Mm-hmm. So I think the executives looked at the material and said, this is a great concept. Thank you for bringing that up. So someone had Jeremiah brought up, and rub salt in that wound. You brought this up, rub salt in that wound. I'm so glad I came to Kentucky. What's your question?
I'll be gentle.
Okay.
If you were to compare the science fiction genre of the mid-90s to today, what do you think the biggest difference is, and where do you think the genre is going?
I think what's cool about right now for television audiences is we're in kind of a golden age of TV. There's stuff on television I never thought would ever make it this far. Everything from the Man in the High Castle to Legion, which is just a brilliant, brilliant show, done in ways that you could not have ever gotten past the network before. That being said, we're still kind of stuck in a bit of a rut on the science fiction side. We're still kind of doing a lot of science fiction early on was written for and by guys who were afraid of girls. And they weren't very deep character-wise. We're starting to see some gradual improvements. I think Expanse is a step in the right direction. There are a few others. But we haven't had the science fiction equivalent character-wise of a Mrs. Maisel. I would love to see us get to that point. So we're making incremental progress, but we can do better.
Babylon 5.
The April issue of 1995, issue number 213 of Starlog, had a cover series of Babylon 5. It was talking about the second season in this issue, but you were a Babylon 5 fan right from the beginning, weren't you?
Yes, I started watching it when it first came on. It was a new science fiction series, and it looked interesting. I know it was on one of the cable networks. It wasn't a network show. And then it was for the second season that it got bought by TNT. That was when they got Bruce Boxleitner. Mm-hmm. So before that, it was just, I can't even remember. It was on some other show, some other channel. You just started watching it. I started watching it from the beginning, and I was hooked. It was great. I mean, I just loved all the characters and the setting and the way it was a continuing story. And that was actually new for the time, having a primetime series that was science fiction that continued from one story to the next.
Yes, because at that time, if we look at this issue of Starlog, we see that it's reporting on the X-Files, it's reporting on Voyager, Tank Girl was out at the time. Tech War was popular, the William Shatner series, but also Deep Space Nine. But at this time, Deep Space Nine didn't have that massive story arc that we've come to know about the Dominion War.
Right. They added the Dominion War later, and maybe we could talk about influences about one show to the other, but Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5 were both awesome shows in their own right.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting when we look through this magazine, there's two advertisements here. One for Sea Trek 95 and one for Cruise Trek 1995. Can you imagine there were Star Trek cruises even back then?
It must have been fun.
Now, Kavura, with those two advertisements about Star Trek cruises, that sounds like we should, on our next episode of Star Pod Trek, maybe even talk about the early days of Star Trek cruises. What do you think?
Yeah, we should do that, definitely. We know what the modern cruises are like. So, yeah, we should find someone and maybe talk about the old cruises.
But since this is our 5th episode, and the cover title is Babylon 5 on the new cast or the new additions to the Babylon 5 team in the 2nd season, why don't we call up our friend, we'll dial him up, Bob Langer, see what some of his memories of Babylon 5 were during the days.
Great idea, Puddin'. Let's do it.
Hey, Bob, you there?
Oh, enjoying some chilly weather up here in Ottawa. It's about 0 degrees Fahrenheit tonight, so staying warm and enjoying some science fiction this evening.
All right, so you are currently in Ottawa, Canada. Were you originally from that area?
No, I was born and raised in Wisconsin. After I did my undergraduate work up at Michigan Tech University years ago, I swore I never wanted to see snow again and moved down to Tucson, Arizona, where I found out the heat really makes me cranky. When an opportunity came to move back north and a position opened up in Canada, I was ecstatic about moving back up here.
Awesome. So give us an idea of what your childhood was like and what your early sci-fi memories were, because you have a lifelong history of being interested in sci-fi. But how did it all start?
Well, it all started as a real young child with my mom. In the afternoons, we would watch the old Flash Gordon serials from 1936, reruns on TV, followed by the original Star Trek reruns. And I remember as a kid being scared completely by the Gorn. Although I think I've gotten a little less terrified of that monster since then.
It's so funny, isn't it? The things that the kids find scary, but at least it was entertaining, and you liked being scared as a kid, right?
Yeah, as a kid, the Gorn was scary, but it was a safe kind of scary. Because you knew it was fake. You knew it was a guy in a rubber suit, and you knew Captain Kirk would win. These days, with a lot of the more realistic look and realistic approaches to science fictions, it's sometimes a bit too scary, I think, for the younger audiences. The realism just brings it too close to home.
That's definitely true.
So it was the serials and Star Trek that got you into sci-fi, and as you developed further, as you grew older, what other aspects of science fiction were you passionate about?
Well, as I grew a bit older and Star Wars came out, the original, I was captivated by the adventure story. The lightsabers, the spaceships, the epic, fantastic worlds. And I was completely devastated when I was reading an issue of Boy's Life a few months later, learning about all the scientific inaccuracies in Star Wars, that there was no sound in space, that spaceships don't have artificial gravity, that We couldn't travel faster than light. For me as a kid, that was worse than hearing there was no Santa Claus. And it was that kind of led me to study astronomy and physics when I went on in school, wanting to know what space and the universe was really like. And maybe if I get around to it someday, writing my own stories that would hold water a bit better than Star Wars did in terms of the science and science fiction.
Now that you know science, it just seems like, in some ways, a lot of scientists like these science fiction shows, so they can appreciate it even more, and create your own stories would be great, and be able to explain it in, science fiction in a way that's still scientific.
Well, what I think would be wonderful is having these amazing stories, being able to tell them and inspire future generations of scientists.
Which Star Trek has done.
Which Star Trek has done and continues to do to this day. I think that's something worth continuing, worth being part of. I'd love to be able to contribute to that type of inspiring people to learn more about the universe and their fellow man.
That makes sense. Now, you actually started a Starlog fan page on Facebook. Can you tell us why you started that and your history with Starlog, and what's the response that you've received?
Well, I started it because about a year or so ago, I saw a news article announcing that the entire catalog of every issue of Starlog was posted on the Internet Archive. And for me, Starlog was one of those beautiful magazines from my childhood, full-color pictures and news about the latest science fiction series, retrospective articles on classic science fiction pieces from the past. And it was one of those magazines that I felt like a kid in a candy shop when I flipped through that magazine. It was always exciting to hear what was going on, to be the first to find out what was coming up next summer in, as far as big blockbusters go. And I loved it. And I figured since, I was so passionate about it, why not start a group on Facebook and see if there are others who had similar interests, fond memories from their childhood, that sort of thing. And so far the group is modestly sized, about 2,700 people. What I found really incredible, though, is that we've had a few of the folks who worked on Starlog actually join the group and share in part of the conversation.
That is awesome. I noticed that. I mean, it's great fun to see those people.
And, I'd love to see this magazine come back, but it would be a tough sell with social media these days and the internet being so pervasive with spilling rumors on, the next episodes of Game of Thrones. And it would be hard for any print magazine to stay on top of or ahead of the rumor mill that's online.
Yeah, there almost isn't a place for a magazine of this type anymore because of the social media now. But for its time, Starlog was the best source.
That was our internet. We've said that numerous times. That's how we found out where conventions were, and that's how we found out what was happening.
That's how fans even connected with each other. I believe they posted, you could publish your addresses if you wrote in, so people could get in touch and communicate. A snail mail form of social media. It's just brings back such fond memories, though, anytime I look at back issues of the magazine.
Absolutely. Let's get into Babylon 5. What was your first experience with being exposed to B5?
Well, I remember being exposed to it, seeing it on TV, and thinking, okay, this is something different than Star Trek, but I wasn't drawn in until it was my coworkers started showing some enthusiasm for it. I missed parts of season 1 on the initial run, but by the time season 1 finished and season 2 started rolling around, a bunch of friends and coworkers would get together after work and watch the week's episode. And on top of that, that social, just finding a community of friends like that, there was a website. I don't know if you guys remember it, but it was the Lurker's Guide to Babylon 5.
No, I wasn't a part of that.
Oh, the Lurker's Guide was beautiful. It gathered together an analysis of every episode as it was coming out. So, the following day after, let's say, Revelations aired at the end of season 1, or no, Chrysalis aired at the end of season 1, you'd get people writing in an analysis of the episode, what each sequence implied. There were people writing a synopsis with small screenshots of the episode. But the best part of all was at the bottom of the analysis page was gathered together all of JMS's postings online on various bulletin boards, answering audience questions or addressing audience concerns about the episode. It was, and still is, it's still online, the best resource for any Babylon 5 fan.
Yeah, that would have been great if to have seen that as we were watching the show. And to see a discussion of it, because there were so many levels to all of the stories of that show. That's one of the things that made it so awesome.
Absolutely. It was always tempting if you missed the night's show to the following morning, pop onto the Lurker's Guide and see the episode summary, or, do you hold off and resist any spoilers and hopefully get a chance to see it before everyone else starts talking about it?
Right, you kind of have to make sure you see it as it comes on. The only way to avoid spoilers, just like now.
Well, now these days you have entire seasons being released all in one go. So you'll have somebody who sits and, binge watches the entire 10-episode season of Titans, and, you don't have that anticipation of waiting. Yeah? Did you guys binge watch Titans?
It's good. Yeah.
I was surprised by it. It was a lot darker than I expected.
It's different than the original Teen Titans stories, so it's taking its own path, but it was fun, especially when Doom Patrol came in.
Yeah. And, I have to admit I'm not quite as steeped in the DC universe, but it was a fun ride. I'm looking forward to season 2.
Yeah, so are we. I tell you what, in the Starlog issue that we were discussing, they have an interview with Bruce Boxleitner, and this is when he was new to the show. He joined the show on the 2nd season. What did you think about changing the commander of the station?
Now that was something at the time that seemed really odd, because Michael O'Hare played Commander Sinclair in the first season. It was clear he was the leading man for the series. This, and having another actor come in an analogous role would have been like replacing William Shatner's James T. Kirk at the end of the first season of Star Trek.
Right, it's very unusual to change the star, yes.
Yeah. And, going through the Lurker's Guide and, talking about the first season as we were watching it, Michael O'Hare's character, Commander Sinclair, it was difficult to warm up to him at first. The early episodes, he came across as a bit wooden, but by the end of the first season, most of the audience, at least in the circle I hung out with, had really warmed up to him and were starting to embrace, okay, this is going somewhere. The series is really picking up steam. And it was quite a surprise and a shock to hear that, Sinclair had left the station to become an ambassador on Minbar, and that this new Captain Sheridan was coming on board. And at the time on the Lurker's Guide, very little was said about why this change occurred. Joe Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, had said it was a mutually agreed upon decision, it was completely amicable, and hinted that Warner Brothers was looking for a leading man with a little more name recognition. And, coming from his background with Scarecrow and Mrs. King, he definitely had more name recognition than Michael O'Hare did.
I remember him from Tron.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it was the big screen and the small screen that he had some recognition.
Yeah, I think he had a larger general public recognition with Scarecrow and Mrs. King, but with the science fiction community, with Tron, he definitely had that. He had earned his street cred, as it were, by playing Tron in Tron.
Well, yeah, I understand that what I heard, the reason Michael O'Hare left was because he had health problems. Have you heard that?
Now, this is something that was interesting. So at the time, back in 94, 93, 94, in the interim between the season 1 and 2, none of that was announced. Back in 2012, after Michael O'Hare had passed away due to a heart attack, if I remember correctly, at a convention, Joe Straczynski started talking about Michael O'Hare and what happened behind the scenes. During the course of filming season 1, he had started suffering paranoid hallucinations, had some very serious mental health issues that were affecting his ability to work.
Must have been like from some meds he was on, probably.
I'm not sure about that, but at the time, Joe Straczynski made a promise that he would not tell a soul the reason behind this change until, while Michael was still alive, while Michael O'Hare was still alive. And it was only after his passing that he revealed that there were these significant mental health issues. Fortunately, though, he was able to come back and play Sinclair a few more times. A real small part in season 2, and in season 3's two-parter War Without End. I would have never guessed that he had any mental health issues seeing that one.
He still did a great part coming back.
Oh, absolutely. He did fantastic coming back. And I have a heck of a lot of respect for JMS for keeping a secret for all those years.
Yes, and that makes him a very respectable person. And I also understand that when Michael O'Hare left, and even other personnel changes, like when the first telepath had to leave the show, those things were unexpected, and they didn't really fit into Straczynski's big plan for these characters, and so he had to do some rewriting when both of those characters had to leave the show.
Well, it wasn't a heck of a lot of rewriting. For each character, for each of the major characters, Straczynski had written a backdoor, a trapdoor, I should say, so that should something occur where an actor was not available for the part or was no longer going to be with the cast moving forward, it would be easy to slide that character out of the storyline while still maintaining the integrity and continuity of the overall 5-year story.
A great idea. Be prepared. Yes.
And I'm glad you brought up that it was a 5-year story as well, because the number 5 is consistent throughout the series, which is unique in itself.
Now, that was something unique at the time of Babylon 5's creation. Was the series was designed to be 5 years long. It would have over the course of the entire span, it would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And from the get-go, when he was selling this or pitching this series to various studios, that was the intent, that this was essentially a giant novel for television, something like The Lord of the Rings or the Foundation trilogy, epic in scope and scale, but told within a very small self-contained space station.
And I understand he put it on a space station to make it, well, for one thing, to help the budget, right? He could do it on a smaller budget if they stayed in one place.
Absolutely. That was one of the problems with a lot of science fiction series up until then, were cost overruns. With your Battlestar Galactica or Buck Rogers or even Star Trek, going to a new planet every week meant whole new sets, whole new exteriors, that type of thing. By having it be based on a space station where everything's self-contained, you can reuse the same sets from week to week. I mean, he hired some set designers who were very conscious, who had a theater background. So they had an understanding of how to make the most of limited sets to have them appear as multiple locations.
Another great idea.
And, interesting enough, for all 5 seasons, he managed to come in under budget. Just barely most of the time, enough for a wrap party for the crew and everyone. But, this was in days where, a typical episode of Voyager or Deep Space Nine was costing almost $1 million. At one point, one of the comments on the Lurker's Guide was saying that, for $1.5 million, Straczynski would be able to show the entire Battle of the Line and everything that led up to it. Which, I guess he kind of got his wish right before season 5 when TNT picked up the series.
And there were other actors of notoriety on the series as well. I think of Bill Mumy as one.
Oh, it was fantastic seeing him on the series with his background for coming from Lost in Space.
Mm-hmm. Musician, Barnes and Barnes. I mean, he's a writer. He's multi-talented.
Absolutely. There was one episode at the end of season 1, toward the end of it, Quality of Mercy. One of the guest stars on that episode was June Lockhart, the actress who played his mother on Lost in Space.
Oh, that was awesome. Yes.
Unfortunately, the two characters didn't have any scenes together, but it was always wonderful the way Babylon 5 brought in actors from other science fiction shows. I think...
Well, they had Andreas Katsoulis, who played Jakar, was also on Star Trek The Next Generation.
He did. He played a Romulan on a few episodes of Next Gen.
Obviously, Bestor.
Oh, Walter Koenig. He did fantastic in that role. I figure he'll always be known as Chekhov from Star Trek, but the work he did on Babylon 5 was fantastic.
And did you notice how he had that hand, right? Bester had his hand that he couldn't move, which was Walter Koenig's idea.
Yeah, I'd heard that. That there was some sort of physical injury and he wasn't able to use that hand very well. I'm not sure what inspired that particular choice, but it was just an interesting little affectation or aspect of the character.
Yeah, so it showed that his character had some sort of history, some sort of conflict or ailment, something to add a layer of complexity to the character.
So what were some of your favorite guest appearances on Babylon 5? The ones that were the most surprising for you guys?
I remember Dwight Schultz was on it. How he played Barclay on Star Trek. And then he came on to Babylon 5 and played like someone who had PTSD. And he was this, like going crazy, seeing, something, like thinking he was in battle all the time.
Oh, that particular episode, oh gosh, I am going to draw a blank, aren't I? But Yeah, there was a alien that was kind of invisible that had attacked an outpost during the Earth-Minbari War where he was stationed, and it left him very shattered isn't the right word, but a bit broken, PTSD. Oh, the episode was The Long Dark, where there was a sleeper ship from Earth that had been sent out a couple centuries before, and this alien presence had taken over that ship, or one of the people on it.
And another great guest star was Michael Ansara as a technomage.
Oh, love that man's voice.
And another great guest star was Michael Ansara as a technomage.
Yeah, the technomages were an interesting concept. You know, it felt like it tied in with the saying I've heard attributed to Arthur C. Clarke that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Yes. Seemed to exemplify that quite literally.
Jeffrey Combs, he was on Star Trek, many Star Trek, he played Star Trek characters, and to see him in Babylon 5, it's kind of funny how you see the actors going back and forth.
It is. One of the more touching ones was having Majel Barrett, Gene Roddenberry's wife.
Yes.
And
as a Centauri, yes.
Straczynski wrote a bit of a monologue for Majel Barrett's character, whose former husband or had passed away was the Centauri Emperor. And this monologue spoke about a man's greatness not being recognized through the course of his life. And Straczynski was clearly writing that as an acknowledgement of Gene Roddenberry's contributions to the field of television science fiction.
And when you think about that, I do have to mention, so many people that were on this show have passed away now. I mean, and they weren't really that old when you consider, like, how many people, like the contemporary show Deep Space Nine, all of their main actors are still alive, but somehow a lot of these people from Babylon 5 seem to have passed away.
Oh, it's tragic. I mean, Richard Biggs, who played Dr. Franklin, was a health nut. I mean, that man was athletic, out running all the time, from what I understood. We lost Andreas Katsoulis, Michael O'Hare, of course.
Yes. And Garibaldi.
Oh, yeah. It's just tragic that so many of the people working on Babylon 5 are no longer with us.
It is sad.
Now, what do you think about the legacy of Babylon 5? Why is it wonderful to rewatch it today, and what can we draw from it?
Well, that's a few different questions all packaged in one. One of the big legacies of Babylon 5 was showing and demonstrating that long-form storytelling, multi-year story arcs, could work in science fiction. Without Babylon 5, you wouldn't have had the stories we see today, like, well, or even a few years back, like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica that came out in 2004. You wouldn't have had that massive storyline spanning 4 years if it wasn't for Babylon 5. Or like the series The Expanse, telling an ongoing story where characters change. It isn't just hitting the reset button by the end of the episode every time anymore.
And that is something that used to be a stigma, because when you say that something is a continuing story, I mean, it used to make people think, you mean like a soap opera? But no, but Babylon 5 did it in a way that people enjoyed watching.
Yeah, the difference between a soap opera and Babylon 5 is that a soap opera is designed to go on indefinitely. You know, you've got soap operas that have been running for 30, 40, 50 years now, where a show like Babylon 5 was designed from the get-go to have this several storylines, but altogether having this rising arc and then leading to a conclusion and denouement. And, not every loose end will be tied up, and it didn't have to be.
And it was great the way he tied it up as well.
It was absolutely beautiful, and I don't think it tied up exactly where he intended it to go when he first pitched the idea and had the outline.
Yeah, I think he had to make a few adjustments along the way, but it still worked out.
Absolutely. But, there was, in the initial, one of the very earliest drafts of the 5-year story arc for Babylon 5, it was going to initially end with the Minbari destroying the space station and being the start of a whole new cycle of war.
Oh, interesting. But he decided not to do that.
Yeah, but, I think that's just simply part of the creative process as you're going through and putting together a series like this. He wrote the vast majority of the episodes of the series. All of seasons 3, 4, and 5, with the exception of one episode in season 5, were written by Straczynski. And he wrote most of the episodes in seasons 1 and 2 as well.
Yeah, that's true. We noticed that D.C. Fontana was involved in writing early on, as well as David Gerald. So we even had Star Trek connections.
And Peter David as well.
And Peter David, yes. So we had Star Trek connections even on the writing team.
Definitely. And I love that, at the time when Babylon 5 came out, there was a bit of the perceived one, either Babylon 5 ripped off Deep Space Nine or vice versa, and kind of a perceived you can't be a fan of both series. And
I was a fan of both, yeah.
Well, I hate to say it, but I tended to be a fan of the underdog, and from what I'd read about the development of Deep Space Nine, it took me a long time to actually watch Deep Space Nine. I didn't watch the series until about 3 or 4 years ago. But
and what did you think of it?
It was an interesting take on a Star Trek series. I think Deep Space Nine is always going to be that unique red-headed stepchild of a series in the Star Trek universe.
Yes, definitely. It's the different one. Discovery is a little bit closer to DS9 in some spirit, but it was well done. Yes, it was an awesome show, definitely.
But as the shows developed, even though the common theme was a space station near a wormhole, the development of the stories really were very different.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, that was one of the things I think I'd heard early on, was that when it came to the scripts that were being submitted by writers, he never wanted to see a Star Trek solution to a Babylon 5 problem.
I heard that as well, yeah. He had to tell that to Peter David, yes. Meaning the characters had to change at the end. They couldn't be the same at the end as they were at the beginning.
And what was the one that he worked on? Was it Believers, where the alien family brought their son to the space station in hopes of getting treatment for a...
No, that was David Gerald.
Oh, that was the David Gerald episode. Okay.
Peter David wrote the one that had Malari's 3 wives.
Oh, gotcha. That was a fun episode.
It was funny, yes.
It was always fun during the initial run of the series because, the audience knew that this was going to be a single continuous story, trying to figure out what pieces and hints were being laid from one episode to the next. Little things like noticing somebody giving someone else a glass of water. What does that mean?
Yes, the minutia was important.
It was. It held together amazingly well. And part of that, I think, is what led to Straczynski writing almost the entire series himself.
Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You brought us some excellent points. It was wonderful reminiscing about this fantastic series with you, Bob. Hey, before we wrap up, is it all right if Kavora ties you up in her lasso of truth and asks you a few questions?
No need for the lasso of truth. I'll be completely open and honest.
Well, all right then.
She still loves wrapping people up, though. Let's do it.
Okay. First question. If J. Michael Straczynski wrote your biography, what would it be titled?
Still going strong.
That's good. Okay. Have you ever had the desire to sculpt your hair like Londo Mollari?
Yeah, and with my hair being down past my shoulders, I probably could pull it off too, with enough hairspray.
I mean, someone said that he's like a peacock, or that he's from the planet of the Three Stooges. But it was a great
That's
look.
how he started off as, but Londo Mollari was really a tragic character by the end.
He was. Oh, that was another thing about how the characters changed during the series.
Absolutely. There was actual character growth between episodes.
And last question. Have you ever eaten a fish head?
Yes, I did. I had fish head soup in Malaysia.
Ooh, wow, that's a story for another time. That's wild.
The host tried offering me the eyeballs as being a delicacy, but I drew the line there. Like, no, thank you.
Wow. Well, I'm wrapping up, and we're very appreciative of the Starlog Facebook page that you started. Can you inform our listeners how they can find out more information about this page and exactly what it contains?
Well, you can log on to Facebook, do a search for Starlog, and the very first article pinned up on the group will give a good description of who we are and what we're about.
Awesome.
Excellent. We love it. Thanks for all that you do. Good talking to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and Happy New Year, folks.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.